kids have a hard time transitioning into the beginning of the school year. And so, just go slow and reduce your expectations a little bit. And earlier bedtimes is sometimes needed as well. So that you get what you inspect, not what you expect. Yes.
We have to get our home back into the school mindset coming out of the holidays.
Yes.
It's not that way.
You can do two different types of activities for memory, visual and verbal.
Understanding why we need to do things the way we do, or the application of the content, is what helps me more than the facts.
Reading is one of those things. Students tackle it at different levels at their own pace. And again, our kids are all unique.
Hope you're having a fantastic week so far. I think we are.
I think so.
Yeah, must have back this bell. So we are on remote location this week. This is the last week of radiation. 2 more treatments today and tomorrow, and then radiation is done and behind us. Yeah. Woohoo! That's exciting. And then just the regular chemo treatments until that cycles out. So
the end of July.
End of July.
Long road to go yet.
Yep.
But we're getting there.
One day at a time. So we're excited, and we thought, hey, you know what? We got us both here, and the house is quiet because it's just Kristen and I. We're in an Airbnb house that is kind of luxurious and nice, and so.
I can't remember the last time we've been alone.
I know.
It's very strange to not have kids interrupting every thought.
Last night, like the whole house was quiet, and it wasn't boring because we were together, but it was just like, what do we do? Like
I kept thinking, wow, is because if we're together, if we go out for our anniversary or something like that, we have activities planned. Yeah. But to just be in a house alone, and I keep thinking, this is what it's going to be like when the kids are gone.
I know.
What are we going to do?
Yeah, but see, we've got dogs. Like I have this little dog that's, how old is she, 13 years old or something?
No, she's 14 or 15.
And she just follows me around going,
She
has separation anxiety when I leave.
She has issues. She has medical issues that cause the anxiety.
I don't really even like this dog, but she just follows me around. At night, she'll sit outside the door.
She loves you.
Yeah. It's like nobody's here asking to go out. Nobody's like, me. All right, so let's get to some of the questions. You have some questions that came in?
Yes, okay. So I have here, Brittany says, how to get back into routine after the holidays. We take a month off, and it's been super hard this year getting back into the swing of things. Brittany, I feel your pain because I've spent most of the last 5 weeks out here away from home. So we have the holidays in there, we have all this radiation in there, and while I know that my husband here has done his best to keep them going in their school, and they have spent some time here doing their school, I know that when I get home, next week is going to be a bit of a transition because I'm going to be there on them, making sure they're doing their stuff, looking through some of the stuff that they've done, seeing where we're at. You almost have to treat it like it's the start of the school year. You have to almost treat it like it's fun, but the kids have a hard time transitioning into the beginning of the school year. Sometimes at that point I pull back a little bit on what they do that week. I don't give them their full, every subject, as many pages that first week that we start school. And so that's something that you can do is, coming in off the holidays, just make their schedule a little bit lighter, let them ease into it, take extra breaks, give extra encouragement. But, I find it's hard for me too, to jump back in. It's just a change, and it's mentally exhausting. And so, just go slow and reduce your expectations a little bit. And earlier bedtimes is sometimes needed as well, just to get the extra rest to make up for that extra energy that's required mentally to get back into the swing of things.
sometimes don't you think our sins catch up with us too? So as we come out of Thanksgiving, we tend to get a little more relaxed. We're doing shopping. Life is getting busy. There's parties, all of that.
Yes.
The holidays, family, you name it. And then all of a sudden, January 2nd comes and it's like, okay, game on. We're all supposed to jump back in.
Right.
And I think, like in this case, we may even need to do some reset.
Yep.
Because, you know, while the kids, we put a lot of burden on them to keep up with their school. Today they're working on it and that. It's hard because they're kids and they still need, they're little sinners like me, and if they don't have supervision.
Well, I love the saying, I wish I knew who to credit to it, but I heard it years ago that you get what you inspect, not what you expect. And so if your expectation is that your kids are going to just continue doing everything perfectly, I can tell you what my kids have done. There's a very big possibility that some of the subjects they're behind in, that they provided one-word answers instead of complete sentences or paragraphs where it's asked. They have, you know, just skipped some things that they just didn't want to do. There's holes speckled all the way through their work that was done leading up to the holidays and while I've been here. And so I know that that burden rests on us, not on them, because we were not there to inspect everything as, you know,
Right.
keenly as we normally do. And so I'm not as harsh. I don't require as much. Cheating, yes, absolutely. That will be dealt with if I find that there's been any cheating. If they've lied, if I've asked, hey, is your math done? And they say yes, and we're 3 weeks behind, absolutely. You know, then we'll deal with that. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll even reset, you know, some of their work. So I do up a yearly daily schedule for them. And then I pad it with extra days off here and there. And then sometimes I'll reset some things. Or sometimes we'll add in some Saturdays for a few weeks to play catch up if I feel that it's needed in some of the core areas.
We've had company for weeks before you moved out here for the radiation.
Right.
So yeah, we're kind of we feel the pain, and it's normal. If
Yep,
you're
it
going
is.
through this, I think it's just normal. See, it's not like school where the kids go get on the bus.
Even
On
then,
Tuesday
though,
morning.
even then, it's hard for the kids going back to school even after vacation.
Right. But they're intentional because they're going to school.
Yes.
We have to get our home back into the school mindset coming out of the holidays.
Yes.
It's not that way.
There is that issue, especially when you don't have a designated schoolroom. That's something that I found in the years that we didn't have a schoolroom.
Yeah.
It's just, it's neither good nor bad. It just is. And what happens is the brain needs to transition. So, when the kids go back to school, getting on the bus, entering into the school building, it kind of jars their brains a little bit to say, oh, something different has happened here. Well, we all live in our home, and so all this activity has gone on in the same places that we're doing schoolwork. And so it's a little bit harder to get that brain to kind of change directions from relaxed to intentional.
Crystal says we did have subject days for a few days after break and just kind of worked away. I think sometimes it's good even to have some schoolwork if you can manage it during breaks.
Yes.
Even if it's just reducing it to 30 minutes, like morning
Right,
basket.
right. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, Amber says, my 13-year-old 7th grader has many learning disabilities. I, however, haven't gotten them diagnosed to get the proper label. She struggles with remembering even as simple things, addition and subtraction. Master Books has been a breath of fresh air, but she still has the trouble of remembering even simple things. Do you have any suggestions? We are working through 4th math book currently in English 5. Thank you. It really depends on, of course, she's not diagnosed, so, you know, that's something that you still have to kind of figure out what's actually going on, what's the underlying reason. But generally speaking, when it comes to memory things, I would work on short-term memory with her. I'm going to say that, but that's with the caveat that some things, such as parts of speech, even your multiplication tables, things like that, those things just take a lot of repetition. And it can take kids weeks, months, even years to get some of that down. Multiple exposure, exposure every year, it kind of layer upon layer builds up until the student has it. So with that being said, just knowing your expectations, are you expecting her to retain too much and remember too much, or are these things that are going to build over time? But short-term memory, I would do multiple things. I would play games, just that simple memory game. I know that for a 7th grader that may seem rather young, but if you do it in a fun way, in using, like, you can do up cards, you could put spelling words on them, and matching the spelling words. You can do the memory game, and in case you don't know what I'm talking about, it's where you have cards that have 2 items. So you have pairs of cards, and then you mix them up, you flip them over, and then you take turns flipping them, trying to find matches. So you can use other subjects and mask it so she doesn't realize that she's actually playing this memory game. But that's one thing that you can do. Another thing that you can do is you can do 2 different types of activities for memory, visual and verbal. You can start off giving 2 to 3 either numbers, letters. It can be dogs or animals if she's interested in animals, anything that she's interested in. And you're gonna say, I'll do it with Randy. 1, 5, 7.
1, 5, 7.
So we would do that with 3 items over a course of time. And if the student gets it right and does really well, add a 4th. If they struggle at 4, then work until they can do 4. Then go to 5. You can also do this by writing it out and showing it for a few seconds. I would hold the card up, you would look at it, and then I would put it down and you would repeat it. So there's some different activities that you can Google, you can search for. Little Giant Steps has a lot of really good activities like that for building memory.
If I could add something, long-term recall is something that I've really struggled with. So I read books prolifically. I mean, I have 3 or 4 books going at any one time. Within a week, I can't tell you what the book was about. Now, if I pick the book up again, my brain recognizes that I've read that book, but I can't give it to you. And I pastored with somebody who could watch a movie, listen to a YouTube clip, or read a book, and he had immediate recall. And a year later, he could recall exactly back. I just could never do that. It was a struggle for me. What I do is I make notes. And so when I write it down, I have like notes on my phone, and I have notes in the books that I've read. As soon as I open up the book and I look at the notes of things that were important to me, it all comes back. And I operate not so much from the fact as I do from the concepts. So understanding why we need to do things the way we do, or the application of the content, is what helps me more than the facts. Some people are real good at facts, and I can't do that. I never have been good at that. So I learn better that way. And I think, is it necessarily a learning issue if a child struggles? I would challenge anybody that says that became a handicap to me.
Right.
I can study for the test. I've passed some pretty complicated tests in my life, but I don't have the recall, right? And so, 2 or 3 days or a week after I've studied for it to take the test, I'm good. My real estate exam, my insurances, all of those things. But I couldn't really tell you today some of those things that would be there. So every kid is unique. And that's something that we can't say this enough. Each child is unique. Just like we're unique and we process things differently, we have different emotions, different backgrounds, everything else. So are our kids. And we can't do one size fits all. And that's the beauty of homeschooling, is stepping back and saying, what makes this kid work? What's going to make this, what's going to help them be successful in life? they may never be good at remembering facts and figures. You had a conversation about spelling. We have, they may never be good at spelling. Tim Dudley, our boss, who owns Master Books, Newly Publishing Group, is classified somewhere as one of the worst spellers. He just is. Kristen's worked with him since 2012. He still spells her name wrong. And you've worked with him for 8 years. 2012, yeah, okay.
I don't know what year.
I know it. So,
he remembers that sort of stuff. And I think really what it comes down to is recognizing that our kids have strengths and weaknesses, that they're all different, that they learn differently. And the school system that we work within, and we're still stuck working within school system expectations, whether we like it or not, even as homeschoolers. It has locked kids into, you're only intelligent if you learn this way in this particular order. And it's not fair. It's just really not fair. It's not a good, it isn't a good judge of success in life. And so I really encourage people to look at the individualness of their student.
Because post-life, if you look at the studies of people who are successful, so many of them were failures in school. They dropped out of school, they dropped out of college, and they went and lived amazingly successful lives. So we're customizing our education to help the child succeed in what God has called them to do, not necessarily be able to do rote memorization, even though that's important.
Right.
Okay.
Amy wants to know, will Master Books ever start making Master Book gear, t-shirts, car stickers? And Erica is right on board with that.
Well, we actually have, Tim has friendships with people who produce that type of material, and he's considering it. Years ago, there's a story where Tim had gotten into the potpourri gift business with Master Books, and it didn't go so well. And so he says, we do what we do. We produce books, and that's who we are and what we do. And merchandising is something that, I think we should look at, and we're talking about, but it's probably not something you're going to see. Our first priority is really getting books and resources out, and then after that, if we can work with somebody to produce materials, that's probably what he's going to do.
All right, Lisa says, any tips on helping an auditory learner with reading and writing? 7-year-old second grader. He's always been a super smart kid and gifted with language and mental math, but he still isn't a solid reader when it comes to writing. Particularly, he struggles a lot. The end of basic language skills was hard for him as he was asked to copy longer sentences. So I'm looking for ways to build up his writing stamina before starting language lessons too. So there's really two questions with this. It's an auditory student who needs help with reading and writing. And so for the auditory side, you might need to let him do his work maybe in a separate room away from the other students so it's not distracting. But one thing that you can do is let him read things out loud, because he's going to hear it while he's reading it. So it's going to, the comprehension is going to increase. Reading is one of those things. Students tackle it at different levels, they at their own pace. And some kids are going to fly through it. Reading came very natural to me. I remember first grade sitting there going through these worksheets, and it was like so easy. Like I just knew it. Whether I had been exposed to it already or not, I just knew it. But not every kid is going to be good at that. It's just, some kids have to work a little bit harder at it. So I would just expose him to as much reading on the side as possible. I personally prefer real books as much as possible, even if you co-read together. So that's how I would tackle that. Now, language lessons, one is about to come out. I know some people are going to who have gone through basic language skills are waiting for language lessons 1, and they're going to repeat it. And there is a lot of extra reading and a lot of extra practice in language lessons 1. So I think that that might be something to consider. Look for the samples as soon as they're available. And then as far as writing goes, I wouldn't stress a kid out. I've had kids that have been a little bit slower with their writing stamina, and I would caution to go slow. So just because there's an assignment where there's a lot of writing, a lot of copy work, doesn't mean the student has to do all of it in a day or in a sitting. There's a couple of ways that you can go about it. You can reduce it. You can say, okay, I'm gonna write this much of it. I want you to write the rest. There's writing it in with a highlighter, writing it out and letting them trace it with their pencil. There's saying, okay, I want you to write 3 words, then we're going to take a break, we're going to work on math, we're going to work on whatever, we're going to do a science project, something else. And then come back to it, okay, write another 3, and you can break it up over the course of the day. You can use that method to work it, to break it up over the course of a week. But I wouldn't let them get stressed about it, because then they're just going to not want to write. And the whole purpose is to help them learn how to write. Now, sometimes they just don't want to, and well, you've got to do at least this much. But I would be really careful not to let it become stressful, and just gradually build up. And that strength and stamina will come. And again, our kids are all unique. They're, God made them different, and we expect everybody to progress at the exact same way. And that's why we're always saying curriculum is a tool. Even what we produce, use it as a tool. I certainly do. Even curriculum I've written, I change. I adapt it for my own needs to each individual student. We want you to adapt the curriculum, because you're the teacher. You're the parent. You're the God-given authority. You understand that child so far better than anybody else can. Or any curriculum that's meant for a broad group. Every single curriculum out there is meant, even master books, for a broad range of students. And so you have to adapt it. And that kind of gets back to the whole question of, is it enough? No curriculum is ever enough. We're the teacher, we're the parents. Again, God gave us the responsibility of educating our child. Different kids are always going to get hung up at different points in their schoolwork, and we have to step in. I've used so many different curriculums through the years. We've homeschooled over 20 years. We've graduated 5 students. I've used a lot of what's out there, and I've always had to step in at certain points and help a student explain it in a different way, find a different resource, because our kids are all different. They're not cookie cutters. A curriculum is a cookie cutter, but you have to shape those cookies in a way that your student can understand it. And so, anyway, my little rant there on, is it enough?
You did kind of a little bit. That's good.
Okay, advice on helping kids make faith their own. What should parents do to model faith? What can parents do in the day-to-day to help their kids' faith become real and deep?
I think I can definitely speak to this. We get what we lead. And in seasons where my heart has sought hard after the Lord, so have my children's. In seasons where my heart has grown cold, so have my children's. And the barometer of my spiritual walk oftentimes is my children. And sometimes we have to take that hard reality and say, where are we, and what example are we setting? It's our children's responsibility to make their faith their own at some point. They're the ones that have to accept the offer that God has given them of Jesus Christ. We can give them the tools, and we know what we want for them, but there's a point where we have to step back and say, the decision is yours. And We know what we want for our children, and it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to say, I will stand accountable for my parenting and who I am, but now I'm releasing that and I'm giving that to you, and your relationship with your Creator is between you and Him, and I'm here to support you, but I'm no longer, you know the left and right now, essentially. So I think that we want to do our best to protect and invest, right? What we put in definitely has an impact. Familiarity has an impact. All of these things that we do with master books, trying to give them a solid foundation in biblical authority, countering secular humanism, countering atheism and evolution and thoughts that erode and destroy a child's faith. And then beyond that, it's really, am I modeling a heart after God? And we've been, as a family, I'm very blessed because Kristen's always had a heart after God from the moment I knew her, and that's been a saving grace in my life. But there's, in Scripture, I once did a message on the body follows the head, and you see it in Scripture where there, godly lineages, and I think it's important. And then really we have to at some point turn them over to the Lord.
Yeah, bathing in prayer, providing good godly influences, whether it be curriculum, books, friends, that sort of thing. And it is the day-to-day consistency, making sure that you're consistent with your faith. Lost our questions. I accidentally hit something. It's that long-term, it's not a sprint, it's
Right.
a marathon. And understanding that God does give us free will, and our children have free will. Mm-hmm. And so, we have to recognize that, and we have to let them know that we can't make their faith decisions for them. We can give them all the tools in the world, we can encourage them, we can participate in that process, but ultimately they have to make the decision that they're going to follow the Lord. And following the Lord is far different than just believing.
And every child's different. Sometimes they kind of get it,
Mm-hmm.
like the Lord just meets you at a certain spot. And
yeah, so. I was that kid, from the time I was 3 or 4, it may have even been as young as 3. I knew the Lord, and he was very real to me. Nobody could have talked me out of it. I had experienced the Lord at a very young age, and He's been with me my entire life, and that's just the way it's been. But other kids, they have questions, they wrestle things, we have to walk them through those things.
I grew up in a pastor's home. I could talk a good talk. I walked the walk, sort of, but it really wasn't until my 30s. I had a come to Jesus moment in an airplane where the landing gear didn't come down, that I sort of woke up to the fact of, ooh, this is some serious business. And that was really the beginning. Even though I would have said I was saved, I wasn't pursuing.
You weren't following. And
right.
I think that that's the difference between believing and following.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge that we have, is teaching our kids that difference.
But I had some foundation,
Mm-hmm.
so I knew where to turn. But it was like in my 30s. So.
Okay, we've hit a roadblock in level 5 math. Does a teaching companion help break down steps for more difficult math, or help describing how to figure out the math problems?
No, I don't think it does more detail. We recommend the Math Antics
Mm-hmm.
on YouTube as a supplement that we've gone through and watched the videos and we've used with our kids. It presents it in a little different light, and so that's a link. If somebody's watching, you could post a link to that YouTube channel. It's not done by Master Books.
It's secular.
Yeah.
So if you've ever come across anything, if they change something, if something's objectionable, please let us know.
Yeah, but we've used it with our kids
Mm-hmm.
where we'll have like long division. We were doing it, but he just needed something else, and the guy does a really good job of explaining it in a way that kind of complements math lessons.
And let me say, this is what we're talking about when we say, is it enough?
Right.
one of the things that we do with our curriculum, at least we strive to, is to leave enough breathing room that for that kid that needs something in a slightly different way or needs that extra practice, you can pause and do that, but you're not making every kid do 20 problems, whether they need to or not. And so this is one of those ways that no matter what curriculum I'm using, I've always gone and looked for things like this when these things come up. So if your student is struggling with something, we would suggest that. We're also coming out with the review books.
With some extra books. Yeah,
Right.
Practice makes perfect,
Mm-hmm.
where you can have some extra practice, maybe quizzes and tests. Debbie asks, Kristen, I know you mentioned before your kids grade their own work. How do you stay on top of knowing where they are? We grade quizzes and tests.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't grade their day-to-day work. They're responsible to grade and learn. We grade quizzes and tests. That's what's the barometer of whether or not they're getting it. The same would be said for a review.
Mm-hmm.
Can they review and narrate back to you? But that's how we stay on top of it, quizzes and tests.
Right. And I will say some of their quizzes and tests are open book, but they still demonstrate whether the student is actually understanding and doing the material.
You know, right? You know if
Yeah.
your kid's getting it or not.
Do you ever use reward incentive to motivate younger children to complete schoolwork? Why or why not? I don't think so. I don't think we've ever used rewards, have we?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the ages. Are the kids going? Are they going to go to Awana? They have the requirement is your schoolwork has to be caught up, and you have certain things that have to be done for kind of privilege.
Yeah, I mean, we do have those types of things, and we've done things like for every 100, I guess, you get $1 or some things like that. We've done that at times.
We try to model our discipline of our kids and training of our kids after what they're going to experience in life. So I go to work, I enjoy work, but I go to work because I get paid. So that's the privilege I get for working. And
yeah, I think that's more our approach. Not that we never use rewards, but they're sparingly.
And that's how you kind of earn privilege by doing what's expected of you.
Yeah, it's their job.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have to work in life regardless. We all have stuff we don't want to do. We all have stuff we love to do. And we approach school in the same way. There's going to be things you love about school. There's going to be things you don't love about school, but you still have to do it. Just like we do, whether we work outside the job, whether we're a mom, with lots of kids. I really didn't care to change poopy diapers, but, I had to do it. There's a lot of things that, vacuuming, doing dishes, I don't particularly like any of that stuff, but I have to do it.
Right.
And so, yeah, our approach is, what are they going to face in life? So we don't want to overdo the rewards. I think rewards have their place. When they do a really good job, to give them that verbal affirmation, a special sticker, that sort of thing, I think that's all good. But I don't want my kids to be too dependent on rewards to get things done.
Because that's not the real world.
Right.
I wish some days Tim would give me more affirmation 4 or 5 times a day. Call me in and just tell me how much he appreciates the work I'm doing. Give me a sticker and a
He might
pat on the
appreciate
back.
if you did that for him.
Probably.
But
that's not life.
Right, that's just not the real world.
So my kids need to kind of know how to push through it and learn self-motivation. And the older they get, the more I think we tend to expect that.
When they go the extra mile, so in language lessons, I built in a thing where they're memorizing. They're memorizing, I think, 1 Corinthians 13, the books of the Bible. Well, those are really big chunks. And so to give them a reward for that extra going of the mile, I think is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
But just being cautious not to make it
Expectations.
they're too dependent on rewards.
We have this thing too with sometimes people say you should have consistency in parenting. I don't.
Well, there should be consistency, but then occasional inconsistent, good or bad, does help them learn how to cope.
There are times that I have purposely overreacted when I really didn't care. just because my kids, I feel life isn't consistent. It's never fair. I never know when I'm going to walk in the office and everybody's going to be in a good mood or a bad mood, or life might throw me something a little difficult. And part of our training is to train them for life.
So you don't want chaos, so I don't want people to mistake that for chaos.
Yeah, I don't create chaos. No.
And it's not this huge swinging all the time. The kids never know what to expect. But having those times where sometimes they get a lot of praise for something, but we don't always give a lot of praise for that particular thing. Or, like you said, if they're in trouble for something.
I also, sometimes, this is a rant. Can I rant?
It's your show.
No, it's not really. So, because you're on, but I'm going to rant. Sometimes people put all this pressure on a dad or parents and say, but your relationship with your child is a model of the relationship that they'll have with God. And I'm not God. I'm not. And there's a type and a shadow in a parent-child relationship that we can understand. But I'm going to fail my kids, and I don't want them to tie that into God also has that same proclivity to fail them. And so I want my kids to know He is the perfect Father. I'm not. Men are going to fail you. We all fail each other. We have sin natures. We become selfish or self-centered, or we just clueless. But we're going to fail each other. And that's not, I don't want that pinned on God because of who I am. I want them to understand He is perfect. I'm not.
Okay. Bethany says, I downloaded the app, but it won't let me make a new account or use the one I made to order books on the website.
Okay, so some people think that when you log into the app, it's the same as the website. The website is running within the app, and so it's not the same. So I'm not exactly certain what issue you're having, but the app is a separate password and login. It doesn't link you into masterbooks.com.
So if you access the website through the app, then you have to log in separately into
the app or
into the website.
Into the website, yes.
Right.
And there's the little 3 bars do that. One thing I noticed I had to call in IT because I was having an issue in the app, and the reason was my Safari settings were set not to allow cookies, and it needs cookies enabled. So he went into my settings, turned that on in the Safari, and then it opened up all the menus and the browser settings and that type of thing.
Very good. I have no clue because I removed the app while I'm going through radiation because I had to cut back on work, juggling 2 households, and all that was too much. So I haven't a clue about how the app is working.
It's going good. The app
I
is
had
really
it and I loved it, and I'm looking forward to jumping back in the next week or so.
We're figuring it out. We're working it, but I think ultimately it's going to actually serve our community really well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being more involved. Okay, I have a 3-year-old son who is a little special. He's developmentally delayed about 6 months because he was deaf for 6 months as a baby. He also has some autistic tendencies. I wanted to start doing pre-K with him in the fall, but he learns best visually. I can sit with him and try to teach with manipulatives, and he won't comprehend it. But if he watches an educational video on the same topic, he will pick up the concept. Does Master Book offer anything that might work for him at this age level?
At 3 years old, I would say enjoy your child. Let him enjoy discovery and play. Don't push. We see this a lot. There's a tendency for people to want to start school. And like some kids, we had one child, she's brilliant, but she just struggled until she was like 7 or 8. She didn't like reading. She struggled with math. And then all of a sudden, it just one day clicked and she took off. Every child is unique, and don't pressure yourself because the student is, at 3 years old, that's really young. And sometimes just play. Through play, we learn critical thinking skills, we learn spatial skills, motor skills, stamina, all of that. Let them play and let them learn that way, and even sit down and play with them and do that. The book work, that'll come.
Yeah, we personally didn't start our children in formal academics until first grade. Not that we didn't play with it, that we didn't do any workbooks. We did. We, as the student was interested, I would do some workbooks, but I did all of the, learning their colors, learning to write their name. I just kind of did that on my own. However, there are some really good materials that Master Books offers that if you need a little more formal structure, and some do and some want that, we have it available. And Carrie Bailey did a fantastic job. I'm really looking forward to Stepping Stones being released. But 3 is really, really young. And I would probably be hard pressed to want to recommend using curriculum at that age, especially with a kid that's a little bit delayed. I would agree with Randy on that. Just play and enjoy and not worry about that side yet.
I remember once reading that in the Hebrew culture, children wouldn't start formal learning until they were 12, because that was at the place where they had kind of developed emotionally and had the skills that they were going to have for life, and that's when they began training them. Of course, we're earlier than that, but sometimes our biggest advice is relax a little bit. There are handicaps and there are special needs issues and there are developmental issues and all of that kids have, but we still just we can almost put that on a kid that doesn't have it just because they haven't developed yet.
Yes, and it didn't matter whether we have one son that was very, very interested in reading, and he taught himself to read at the age of 3. He knew all of his sounds. And then one day I thought, I should show him how to combine the letters to actually read. And I showed him that, and boom, he was reading. I didn't ever use a reading program with him.
Right.
But even with him, I still didn't start formal academics until 1st grade. And then we have the absolute opposite. We have an adopted son that has fetal alcohol syndrome, and I didn't start formal academics with him either until 1st grade. So, it really didn't matter to me whether the kid was advanced or not. We did, Play-Doh and Legos and building blocks and tangrams and coloring and painting and stuff like that.
Because you still got till they're 18.
Yes.
How many times can we study American history, seriously?
Okay. Mallory says, I have a 6-year-old working at a 2nd grade level and reading around 4th or 5th grade level. She wants to do school and learn. I want to work with her and give her more challenging things because she wants it. But I'm so busy breaking up fights between my 3 and 2-year-olds and feeding my 3-month-old or rocking him when he's fussy, as well as try to keep up with housework. How do I advance my daughter but also deal with the constant disruptions of my younger kids? How do I balance mothering with teaching? Yeah, I haven't been in those years for a while, but they were challenging. I'm going to say this. Make sure that you're getting downtime away from all of that. If I can encourage you with anything, it's that. Because regardless of what systems you put in place, what schedules, what discipline things that you put in place, you're still in a season of life that is overwhelming, and your brain needs the rest in order to tackle all of that. I know that it's really hard. It may just be a 15-minute soak in the tub or a shower, or I spent a lot of time in the bathroom, honestly. Sometimes I sat on the floor reading a book or a magazine. I shouldn't say a book because I have an issue. When I start to read a book, all of life ends, and I continue reading until, I've finished the book.
Yeah.
So I had in that season stop reading books. But what I did is I had magazines. And so I would take a magazine in, and I could read through an article. I wouldn't have to finish. I would still feel that completion by getting through an article. So I would really encourage you just to set that time aside. Even like I said, if it's only 10-15 minutes a day, that your brain has a chance to just decompress and to rest. I know it's not easy, but if you can discipline yourself for anything, I would say that. I'm not of the mindset that my needs come first, but there is a place that the mind and the body are so exhausted that if you can get some amount of time to refresh yourself, you're going to go back into that situation with more patience, with more love, which, you know, reading the Bible is wonderful if you can have, you know, that moment. If that's all you can do is to read, you know, that, and that's another thing that I would do, is I kept a separate Bible in the bathroom. And like I said, I'd sit next to the tub, set my Bible there, and read a passage.
Now, something you do now, and I've just discovered it, you use an app called Daily Audio Bible.
Yes.
I use an app called Dwell, and it reads the Bible, and you have different tracks of scripture and stuff like that, and we're able to actually get the word in times like when you take a shower, you're getting ready in the morning, you're
Yes.
listening to the word being read.
Yes.
And Dwell does the same thing. Those are awesome apps. I think self-care is like when the plane is crashing and the oxygen mask comes down, you got to get the oxygen mask on for yourself before you can help anybody else.
Right.
And I do think stuff that we didn't realize the importance of. Were you getting, you know, did you have good nutrition? Were you getting enough sleep? Sometimes you don't always have that, but self-care really does.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do it all. You can't get enough of everything. You're not going to get enough sleep. But are there things that you can do to maximize how much sleep you can get? Same with nutrition. You know, are there things that you can have that are ready-made that are healthier choices? You know, an apple versus a candy bar, those sorts of things that are there, that are easy. You know, things like that are just sometimes little tweaks can make a big difference.
We know somebody recently who realized that they were on their phone too much.
Right.
And they put their smartphone down, went and got a flip phone for a season, and I'm amazed at how much happier they were.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we need to be told, you know, in that downtime or that quiet time, take your phone and set it aside too, because we are becoming addicted to our phones and technology. And if we're bored, we almost always go that way.
And I have to be careful of that.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
The devices are meant to keep us on them. And sometimes we have to actually just discipline ourselves to say, you know what, we're setting the phone over here, putting it in a drawer, shutting it up. We don't look at it from the periods of, you know, such and such a time.
Yeah, because one of the things that it does is it adds more chaos to your mind.
It does.
You know, and in those years, that's what I found was so draining, was the chaos of the mind. Just getting pulled in so many directions and not able to complete anything. So with that said about the self-care in the actual day-to-day, take a look at your life patterns. Is there a time that you can mesh the two little ones to be taking a nap while you're working with the older ones? You might not have a traditional school schedule, you know, and sometimes even in the evening, you know, taking, say, maybe math and letting dad handle math in the evening with the kids. There's some creative things that you can do with your schedule to optimize the time.
Or have somebody watch the 2 and 3 year old, or dad watch, while you just take them to a coffee shop one night a week and do something like that to give individualized attention.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's a challenge. You know.
But it's a season. It doesn't last.
It doesn't last. I mean, we have 9 kids spread out over 20 years, and
we had 4 under the age of 4 at one point.
Right, because we had adopted, and so we were also dealing with a lot of special needs issues, and with the son that we adopted, it was crazy at times. Plus, we were running a business.
And things fall, and pastoring. Things fall between the cracks, but that's life too. So,
Right.
and teaching our kids how to work with the ebb and flow of life, because life isn't perfect. You know,
Right.
we're dealing with cancer. We didn't want to deal with that. We've got other things in life we would like to do.
This wasn't my life story.
Yeah. And this is life though, right? The ebb
Right.
and flow. And so my kids need to know that, okay, life isn't about you in this season. We're all working to get mom healthy and to heal mom. That's it. And I expect, you know, they're not getting as much attention. They're not getting as much of that. But that's because that's life, and that's the way it works.
As far as the 2 and 3 year old with the bickering and fighting, you know, that is a tough one. And I would probably, until you're able to really consistently deal with that, because right now you're nursing a baby, you're juggling a lot, I would give them separate activities separate parts of the room. I would just keep them as separate as possible. That's what I would personally do, until you're in the place of life that you can deal with the underlying issue of why they're fighting.
And we did a lot of growth hacking over the years where we tried different things. We set up in different rooms. Sometimes sometimes you'd have a playroom in the school. Sometimes we'd move the schoolroom away. That we just
we use playpens sometimes.
There was no one size solution.
No, there really isn't. And you have to know the needs of your students. There's just a lot of different pieces in that puzzle, working with it. And I would go into some of the moms groups that like in the more general homeschool groups or even just moms groups and ask for some very specific ideas. You might be able to glean some things. There's a lot of things that work for a lot of people that may or may not work for you, but you may come across some great ideas that'll help you.
We're almost at the end.
Yeah. I have a 10-year-old with ADHD and struggles with spelling and reading. Should she wait on the language lessons and focus on her reading and spelling skills first? She has completed language lessons 2 and remembers none of it. I would go more on how well she did while doing it, not necessarily that she can remember all the grammar stuff. How is she writing? How's her writing skills? As far as spelling goes, spelling's just one of those things. I've battled like crazy. Spelling comes easy for me. It's just something I was born able to do. And I learned. My kids, some of them were born spelling correctly and others were not. And I tried every approach. And it might make a little tiny temporary difference. That was it. My kids that couldn't spell, the older ones, they just graduated to spell check.
But praise the Lord, we live in an age where, Siri, how do you spell this?
Right.
And like I was saying about Tim, I didn't completely finish it because Tim is an amazing success. He's brilliant. And because he can't spell Kristen's name right, has not affected his ability to succeed.
Not one bit.
So sometimes we get caught up in the details and
fear.
Yeah.
Fear. It's so funny because it's one little area of life. And he might have to work a little bit harder at it. So I would never hold back a kid from a language arts program, no matter what program they were in, because they aren't good at spelling. I wouldn't do that. I also wouldn't hold them back because they are still struggling with, nouns, verbs, and that sort of things, because those concepts are taught repeatedly in every single curriculum each year and expanded upon. So you can be constantly reviewing those things. That's not a big deal. I would base it more on their writing ability.
And I think we do want to still, we don't want people to think that we're saying it's okay if your kid doesn't know how to spell, don't worry about it.
Right.
You still want to be working that, but in your own head, you need to get the mindset that this doesn't mean my kid is going to burn in hell because they can't spell.
Or be an utter failure.
Did you catch the rhyme? That was almost like a rap song.
No, I didn't.
You're not going to end up in hell because they can't spell.
There you go. Very good.
And there was even a cadence to it.
Some things, what I tell people is you want your student to show progress. They're probably it's never going to come naturally. Think about some things that you're not good at. You probably struggled your entire life. You might have found ways to cope with it and to improve on those things. Like for me, art doesn't come easy for me. It's a mystery to me how people can sit down and draw or paint these things that look like what they're painting. That I don't get it. It's a mystery to me. My mind just doesn't work that way. But I still can enjoy artistic expression. It's just not going to be, nobody may know what I have drawn, but I do it through scrapbooking. I do it in more of a crafty way rather than the hand-drawn stuff. But I can still enjoy drawing stuff, even if it's just for my personal pleasure. I can still do that, and I can improve upon that if I want to. It's the same with our kids with spelling. If it doesn't come natural, they still need to work at it, but it doesn't mean it's ever gonna come natural or easy for them. And I'll tell you the one tip that has worked the best out of all these years, and I just started doing it with our he's almost 13 or 12-year-old, in the last couple of years.
In like 6 days.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, what I do is when he needs to know how to spell a word, I just spell it for him. I encourage him to ask. So when he's writing, if he says, Mom, how do you spell the word belong? Now, when I first started it, I would do short chunks. I would say BELONG. Then I started building it up. So now I would spell the whole word. BELONG. And then he'll either write it out or he'll say, how do you spell it again? And I just repeat the whole word, BELONG, because I want him to start seeing the words in the bigger chunks instead of the smaller chunks, because he's at that point developmentally. He's ready for that, but I worked him up to that. And I will say, out of any of the things that I've tried, whether it be a curriculum, whether it be a supplement, that has worked the best for this student, but he may be more auditory. I don't know.
I think sometimes we lose sight of why we're actually teaching these things.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about Writing Strands, and I know there was a discussion about it earlier, and I want to post Dave Marks, the creator of Writing Strands. He's passed, but he spoke at a convention, and what he was really looking at was just teaching, this is what we're doing, we're learning to communicate. And sometimes just having them write letters, or if you have a friend or a pen pal, or you have somebody that they admire, having them write letters that say, I'm watching your video and I really admire the work that you've done. Or I grew the most when I went to work for Wally, in that I was sitting at a desk having to learn how to write, do math, like all the skills in college that just weren't clicking all of a sudden started to click.
Because you were applying it.
And then I went back to college, and now I was refining the skills, but I understood what I wanted to get from it, and that was so much more helpful. And we approach like language as you need to know what a noun, a verb, an adjective is, but we don't even know what we're doing. We don't even understand how we're trying to communicate. Never once in all those pages and pages and pages of nouns, verbs, adjectives, underline once, twice, direct objects, circle, all that garbage, did they tell me what you're trying to do is learn how to be a better communicator so people will listen. That was it.
Right.
They should have told me that. I would have cared.
I don't know about that.
I have a love-hate relationship with school. I loved school because Kristen was there. I hated it because it never made sense. So I'm glad I don't homeschool by myself, because my kids, I'd be like the ultimate unschooler, but they wouldn't know anything. Probably. Kristen provides the structure. I provide a little bit of the unstructure, but we have balance.
We do.
So we're glad she's coming home.
Yes, I have missed my family immensely.
So, hey, well, hopefully today was helpful for you, and we certainly appreciate the questions, and we appreciate being part of this community. We definitely appreciate you guys praying for our family through this season. God has been so good.
Amen.
And at the beginning of this journey, I talked about that moment on Mount Carmel when you've done everything you can and you just say, okay, Lord, your power. And we just can't say enough. God has moved, and we believe fully in his power and the way he's moved. And even though we would have loved to have different outcomes at different times, we've still seen his hand and his power, and so many people that come up to you and have shown love right from the beginning.
Right.
We were at a furniture store, and a woman came up, she was working there, and came up and prayed over you at the beginning of the journey, and it was a very anointed prayer. It was very powerful. We came back 2 weeks later, she had been let go. She was
I don't think she was let go, was she? She left.
Yeah. And so, we just knew like God had planted her there for that moment in time, and we've seen that.
It's been big things down to like yesterday. There's a one of the nurses there. His name is Joe, and there's two guys there, Joe and Tim is the go-to guy when they can't get an IV in. Tim has never gotten an IV in my arm. It hurts like
Joe has 6
terrible.
kids, and he's a believer, and he's very calm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Joe, he just gets it in. So it's funny because the nurses will go, "Oh, we'll get Tim," and I say, "No, get Joe." And now when I went in yesterday,
He just came and did it.
yep, he saw me, and we made our nods, and he came right over before the nurse even had even tried. He just came right over, and just things like that. It's just such a comfort. And
part of why I'm telling you this is in the app we have a chapel group. I would love it if you posted prayer requests in the chapel group, because we actually have a chaplain who's dedicated to just watching the group, and she's prayed a lot for our family, for our company. I know she the Lord, to me, that's her gift, and so she's in that group, Jennifer, and she kind of keeps things moving forward. But we also love to hear the testimonies of what God has done in your family, because a testimony to me is proof that if God's done it for you, He might do it for me, and that's an awesome thing. So there's power in testimony. When I was a kid, I remember people saying we'd have prayer testimony time, and that's not as popular anymore as it used to be on Sunday night church. But to have people actually talk about the things that God has done and the way that He's moved, because that builds up all of our faith. And we're all in similar journeys, right? We all have spouses, we have families, we have in-laws, we have all of these things, and sometimes we can relate to each other's testimonies. So if you're not in the group and in the app, please join the app and be sure to be in that group, participating in the spiritual walk that we all have as believers. That's something that we can do in the group that's harder to do in the Facebook group. So, all right, good?
good.
All right, so we're going to catch lunch. Hey guys, we appreciate you, and thank you for sharing this time with us.
I'm smirking. How are we going to catch lunch? We got a chicken running around there.
There's a barbecue
That's
place
the
down
image
the
I
road.
had. We're going to catch lunch. We're going to go run out and back, and there is a deer that hangs out back
Woo
there.
pig suey. We are in hog territory. We're going to go for some barbecue. All right, guys, talk to you later.